By 1940, the people of the state of Oklahoma had gone through 10 merciless years of economic hopelessness. It was a state devastated by the Great Depression. Oil was down to 10 cents a barrel. Farmers and ranchers were suffering so much, they were selling cotton for 3 cents a pound, all the while spending 2.5 cents per pound to pick it. You could not make money in the cotton patch. Wheat was going for nothing, and the Dust Bowl was driving people off the land. People were leaving the state. This was the age of the grapes of wrath. Across the globe in Germany, Hitler and the Nazi regime had begun a brutal assault on Poland, Austria, and Denmark. Still an isolationist country, the United States was gearing up for a Lend-Lease program that would provide aircraft to Great Britain and other allies in preparation of our own U.S. defense.
People of Europe who are defending themselves do not ask us to do their fighting. They ask us for the implements of war, the planes, the tanks, the guns, the freighters, which will enable them to fight for their liberty and our security. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself.
As war waged overseas, to fulfill the promise of President Roosevelt, the United States War Department scoured the middle of the country in hopes of finding land that would be ideal for constructing an aircraft factory and maintenance facility. Knowing that there was a search for land, civic leaders in Oklahoma City established the Industries Foundation, a trust through which the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce could purchase land for such a facility, later changing that concept to an air depot site.
The land south of the North Canadian River on the east side was good geographically for an air base. The price of farm land had been going down throughout the 1930s, so it was the right price. We had a workforce, people looking for work, so a labor pool. And then the community working together through the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce could say, build it here, don't build it in Amarillo, don't build it in Kansas City, don't build it in Fort Worth, build it here. As the Defense Department looked at the options, where will we build this air depot? They finally decided Oklahoma City. And so the impact of the Midwest Air Depot, Douglas Bomber Plant, was not just Oklahoma City, but it was the state of Oklahoma, and it gave people hope. Maybe the future will be better than yesterday. Hope is so critical in any community. We have to believe that we have a future. Well, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce tried to keep secret the land they were consolidating for the base.
And many men looked around to see if they could figure out where that base was going to be built.
One of the men seeking the answer to this question was W.P. Bill Atkinson. Atkinson was a visionary, a real estate developer, and a journalist. When word got out about a proposed air depot being built in the Oklahoma City area, he began to investigate. Based on the knowledge he gained about the project, he began purchasing parcels of land north of Southeast 29th Street.
He was such a great communicator with people. He was a true visionary. He was a businessman 24/7. He was always creating. He was a master at asking questions. All of the answers to questions he was asking were going to be answers that would help him in the future.
Atkinson took the information about the site requirements, got into his car, and began driving east of downtown Oklahoma City. The requirements stated the new site must be 10 miles from a large city, have flat land, be away from any oil drilling, and rail service must be nearby. At a point, he stopped his car, looked back to see the skyline of Oklahoma City, thinking he must be about 10 miles away.
And later went up to a home And the lady of the home, who lived on the south side of 29th Street, greeted him at the door one morning, and he said, "It's very interesting because none of the farmers on the south side of 29th want to sell their property. And I know that you are not supposed to say anything, but if you wouldn't mind to just wink an eye if I'm asking you the right question." And the question was, "Has anyone spoken to you all about purchasing your property?" And she winked her eye. That's the beginning of the city and the beginning of Tinker Air Force Base.
Once all the land deals were finalized, Atkinson conferred with Pentagon officials to learn their needs for the community that would act as support for the new base.
Here's Midwest City, not quite one day, but born grown in terms of the modern sense. It doesn't start with a crossroads community and a blacksmith shop and a general store in 4 or 5 houses, and then grows a little bit over 20 years. Here, you're starting with a master plan, an undeveloped land, and suddenly there's a city there within a year. Most communities are divided the direction to go. In this case, there would have been no division. We're going the right way. We're defending our country. We're working shoulder to shoulder to build these planes to fight against Hitler and the fascists.
As the nation was cranking up the war machine, the production of the hardware that came out of Tinker Field was critical to the success of those missions.
The C-47, or Skytrain, was introduced into service during the 1940s. Built at Douglas Aircraft Manufacturing Facility, now Tinker Air Force Base, the aircraft was vitally important in transporting cargo and troops during the war. More than 10,000 were manufactured. 5,400 of them were produced at the Douglas facility.
We had approximately 27,000 people working at Tinker. Good paying jobs. They wanted the jobs. They liked the jobs. And they trained and learned their jobs extremely well. It was a very confident feeling that we had a workforce that was that stable and was that skilled.
Atkinson hired the services of Seward Mott to design the new community.
The way the streets were designed, the location of the shopping center was really in the central part of the community. The base was right across the street. Parks were all around the neighborhoods. Schools, churches.
The first home was built in April 1942. Atkinson took Mott's recommendation to create curving streets and circling roads. This design became the model for post-war community development. Because of the unique and well-placed development, Midwest City was named America's Model City in 1951.
As Granddaddy continued developing to the north, the homes got larger, and he needed to have a special marketing tool to help sell those larger homes. That's when he got real creative.
He was such an intelligent businessman.
To assist in caring for the ponies that Atkinson purchased to give away to families, he hired a young Midwest City boy, Joe Cole, to act as one of the ranch wranglers.
He could tell, and I've heard him say before back then, that if you can get the kids here at the pony farm and get them around the ponies and ride them and teach them something and bring their family with them, they'll sell a house for me.
The families would come over to look at these homes, and the first thing he would do was to take the family into the kitchen, and he would open the door and swing that Lazy Susan to show the lady of the home what a wonderful feature that was. And the last visit would be to the backyard. And he would open the back door, and he picked up a bucket of oats. And he shook that bucket of oats and handed it to the children and said, "If your daddy buys this home, you get that saddled pony that's in the backyard." The poor man of the home had no other choice. His wife was sold, his children were sold, and so he ended up purchasing that home.
That's really the way I'm confident that most homes on Bella Vista were sold initially.
Without Midwest City being there as a place for people to live, a place to eat, to buy their services, their groceries, a place to go to church, the success of the bomber plant, the success of the air depot would have been different. And we wouldn't have had the good DNA of that early community.
Marion Reed was an early leader whose contributions continue to impact the community today. Reed served as the city's mayor for 22 years and is credited with being one of the originators of Midwest City's government.
It was a small town. You knew everyone. Back then, they had their first trash truck, and at the end of the day, when people would call and say, my trash didn't get picked up, Dad and Bob Matthews, who was a councilman, would go grab the trash truck and go empty it themselves. Dad had all kinds of stories about starting Midwest City and working with Bill Atkinson. The schools was the center of everything. And, you know, if your kids were in that school, you were there as a parent supporting them.
With the start of wartime activities at Midwest Air Depot and the building of planes at the Douglas Aircraft Plant, came thousands of workers. The sudden arrival of families made it clear that the development of a school district was a high priority. So, in April 1943, Oscar Rose was hired as superintendent for this new community on the plains.
Mr. Rose was obviously one of a kind. He was a very far thinker. He was way ahead of his time in education in many ways. We had all these students and didn't have any place for them to be taught. That's when we had to have barracks brought in. They couldn't keep them cool. When you tried to heat it, well, part of the barracks would be pretty comfortable. The other part would be cold, and the students would have a hard time. When I'd go to visit, there'd be ice around the doors and the windows. Sometimes the windows would be iced up on the inside. We just didn't have enough classroom.
Rose became growingly concerned about the sustainability of Midwest City schools. He asked for assistance from both United States Representatives Carl Albert and Tom Steed. Rose's perseverance paid off when Congress signed a bill in 1950, referred to as the Impact Aid Bill.
He worked a lot in Washington, D.C., trying to put impact aid together, plus other school issues that would affect the entire nation.
Impact aid funds are dispersed to local educational agencies that are financially burdened by federal activities, such as Midwest City, with families serving or working on the base.
The impact aid allowed us to be one of the best school districts in the state. Mr. Rose was one of the most visionary educators that I had the pleasure of knowing. And he worked at it all the time. I mean, after church on Sundays, he'd go back to the office. He thought that it was truly the best thing for the students to have an educational facility like Rose State in Mid-Dale. He did all of the legwork originally to be able to try to get it off the ground. And the first college was named Oscar Rose Junior College. We still are reaping the benefits of his visions. And of course, he was right. I mean, look at that now.
The Atkinson home was often used to entertain powerful political figures and dignitaries. Atkinson became intrigued with the idea of entering into politics, and thus mounted campaigns for both the 1958 and 1962 gubernatorial elections. After hard-fought and contentious campaigns, Atkinson lost both runs for governor. He credited attack editorials written by various Oklahoma City business leaders and E.K. Gaylord, publisher of the Daily Oklahoman, for the defeats.
And so Bill Atkinson looking around, what's my next investment? What's the next chapter in my life? Former journalist, professor of journalism, knows the newspaper business. He has a growing community. These people need a newspaper.
What was his true drive of starting the Oklahoma Journal? I know, it was the campaign. It's kind of like if you can't beat them, then join them.
Between 1964 and 1980, the Oklahoma Journal aggressively covered state and national news. One of the most difficult stories they covered during this time occurred less than a mile from their offices: the closing of Midwest City's Glenwood Addition and School.
We had one long runway, north-south runway, that was capable for jet engines, big airplanes and fast fighter airplanes.
Friday afternoon, August 25, 1961, First Lieutenant W.H. Barber took off from Tinker Field in an F-100 Super Sabre fighter jet, freshly loaded with 1,800 gallons of fuel. The 27-year-old pilot barely got off the ground when a fire in the fuselage caused the jet to lose control. The plane slammed into a house at 325 Ferguson Drive, killing 2-year-old Tibby Lynn Tuttle and her 4-year-old sister Judith. Lieutenant Barber said that Saturday, "If I could have stayed aloft one more second, the plane would have missed hitting the house." Again, on Thursday, October 7, 1969, a TF-100 Super Sabre trainer jet crashed into the Glenwood Addition, destroying 3 houses and killing the co-pilot. The crash was 5 blocks from the Glenwood School.
So there was a big movement about trying to make that area safe.
With top Air Force officials growing impatient, doing nothing was a guarantee Tinker would close. U.S. Representative Tom Steed put it bluntly: "The next 5 years will bring a life-or-death struggle for the survival of military bases like Tinker, and there could be no stronger insurance for Tinker than the resolution of the Glenwood problem."
A decision had to be made to relocate housing assets that were at the end of the runway.
At the end of the 1972-73 school year, the Mid-Del Board of Education did its part by voting to close Glenwood Elementary.
So the county, along with the city, went in and had an election to purchase that land.
City and state leaders, alongside U.S. senators and representatives, including Speaker of the House Carl Albert, pulled out all the stops in supporting the question. In a front-page editorial, the Daily Oklahoman declared, "Responsible and patriotic citizens will vote yes."
You know, it was a hard thing for those people to lose their houses. These were houses they'd raised their kids in and all that stuff. They didn't want to lose them.
The campaign succeeded overwhelmingly, winning by a margin of 88%. It took almost 5 years to clear the Glenwood neighborhood. The last 6 houses were auctioned on January 13, 1978. Today, Tinker uses the land for training.
Tinker Air Force Base, first of all, is a national asset. The mission that happens here at Tinker Air Force Base contributes to national security every day. The base is a part of the community. That partnership is critical to the base being successful and to the mission being executed without fail.
Created in 2005, the Defense Base Closure and Realignment Commission, or BRAC, was established to ensure the integrity of the base closure and realignment process. During this time, Tinker was under critical evaluation from the commission.
I just watched how the BRAC worked, and it just seemed like the people who had the most positive aspects of their base, they were the ones that saved it.
So as they start looking at air depots, they're looking at Tinker Air Force Base. Is this one that we can or should close?
For those whose livelihood depended on the viability and the long-term interest, it was everything.
There's an intangible in this entire conversation that goes beyond the votes in Congress, and that comes back to the communities supporting these facilities.
Midwest City understands that. In every decision that they make, they are constantly thinking about the impact to the base.
Through the efforts of Tinker Air Force Base and the surrounding communities, including Midwest City, Tinker was not tapped to close. Today, it remains a valuable resource in national defense and a strong economic engine for Midwest City.
The weather kind of got started early in the early afternoon.
The tornado circulation right here, it's just south of Highway 37.
We had all the different television channels on.
We are talking about this. This is a storm that is on the ground in the Newcastle area.
But we were really starting to gear up to assist other cities.
County and also in southeastern Kingfisher County.
We truly thought this thing was going to be south of us, and we thought that Tinker was probably in danger.
It looks to be, Tinker Air Force Base looks to be in the direct bullseye path of this tornado. Even south.
I was on the phone with Captain Loveland down at Station 2, and he says, the tornado is in Midwest City.
We're just watching the lights of the city just disappear, Mike, as we're flying along here.
It is just, it's within a mile due south of the City Hall in Midwest City.
And he says, it's to our west. And I said, you mean to your south? And he says, no, to the west. And he goes, it's just plowing right into Midwest City.
Seven.
Mike,
that is damage.
Mike,
okay.
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Mike,
Yes,
you got to look at this. This is phenomenal. It's gone. The neighborhood is gone. We are over a neighborhood just west of Tinker Air Force Base. It is gone.
You know, you can see that stuff on TV. The mass destruction was just unbelievable. The people just came together. The whole community did. I asked the Air Force Base to help clear debris, and they bust those airmen in. It brought out the best in people. I still sometimes think we sort of have some small town mentality, and when it comes to helping others, they came to the rescue of everyone.
I don't think anybody could have dreamed that we could have ever recovered like that. Under Charles Johnson's leadership, they were able to get a game plan together for redevelopment.
When you live in an area as long as we've lived in Midwest City, I hate to say you just assume, but life goes on. And when there was a new development in the community, we celebrated that new development and continued to grow.
I think the future of Midwest City is bright. That future is deeply embedded in our roots. Those of us who have been fortunate enough to be asked to serve in leadership positions stand on the shoulders of giants.
To me, it's no accident that all these retirees who have ever served at Tinker move back to Tinker at the end of their career. How can we make sure that the next generation of veterans still want to come back to Midwest City to live?
The people, the community understood who we were, and they embraced us as military members. What we look forward to is now that we're a part of this community is helping to strengthen this community.
History repeats itself, but in Midwest City, our history continues.
I believe in this community, and I believe in the people in this community. And my husband and I are working to be a part of that and to help it grow and be more successful even in the future.
Well, you can trace that line, that thread, all the way back to the very beginnings. And Bill Atkinson and those other city builders who saw flat farmland and says, we've got a vision of what this can be. And they did it.